I am fortunate enough to be sitting with Paul Levy right now and delighted that he is willing to speak to us a little bit about his experience with spiritual emergency, but in particular, after a talk he gave with Andrew Harvey 6 months ago, he was talking about the transformation that's happening in the United States. So I want to welcome you, Paul, to the IMHU audience. Thank you so much for your time.
I'm just so happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Okay. So just to let others know a little bit about you, I've been impressed by your articles, impressed that you're also interviewing a lot, doing private consultations to assist people who are in a spiritual emergence process, awakening process, and sharing with them some of what you experienced in quite a challenging, I'll call it, time in the
Mhm.
hospital when you were younger. And so you're talking now about transformation from the point of view of caterpillar to goo to butterfly, and you're applying that to what's going on now in the United States. At least that was 6 months ago. So what's your update? What's going on now? And what can we do to assist to move into a higher some realm?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I mean, I've been pointing out for decades that we're in the middle of a collective psychosis. And I've been also pointing out that there's these, you can call them, whether you use the word, you could say evil or darker forces that are really becoming more and more apparent in our world. And we're at the point in our history where we can't just sort of, we can't ignore the madness or the darker forces because our survival as a species is really in question. And so I'm in the US and it's clear that, so for example, the butterfly caterpillar symbol or image, it perfectly, I think, has everything to do with what is happening today because holographically encoded within the very process that's happening, not just in the US, but in the world, we might be, unwittingly committing collective suicide, and or we might be catalyzing a global awakening. It's very quantum in that both potentials are there in a superposition of states, and how things are going to manifest depends on us. And if we recognize what I continually point out is that something is being actually revealed to us through the insanity and the darkness that's playing out. Now, going back to the caterpillar butterfly, I think we all know a caterpillar at a certain point, it just goes into the cocoon, into the chrysalis, and turns into this goo. And at a certain point in the goo, something happens. These cells, these imaginal cells, all of a sudden start appearing, and their function is to catalyze the metamorphosis of the caterpillar into the butterfly. But the remaining caterpillar, which is the goo, experiences the imaginal cells as an alien invader. So it starts to fight with them, and it's like there's a conflict. But that just makes the imaginal cells even stronger and even more replicate. The point is that that state of conflict that's happening, and if you see it as one seamlessly whole interconnected quantum system, where the caterpillar, the goo, the imaginal cells, the potential butterfly, it's all one whole quantum system, that the conflict is incredibly essential part of the birth of the butterfly. Okay. That's where it maps on to what's happening in today's world because the opposites within that are ultimately found within the psyche have gotten completely polarized in the body politic of the world. And, and that's reflecting the inner polarization inside of all of us, inside of our psyche. And it's really a question of what do we do with that? If we identify with one side of the polarity and project out the other, well, then we become one-sided and guaranteed we're going to develop some form of symptom of dis-ease from that. But the idea is, and any creative person knows this, if you're able to consciously hold that creative tension of the opposites with real integrity and not just prematurely identify with one of the opposites to get away from the pain, because it can be painful. But if you really hold that tension of that creative tension of the opposites in awareness and with awareness and in integrity, and I'm a student of psychology, and it was Jung who taught me this. Out of holding those tension of the opposites comes the transcendent function. He also calls it the reconciling um, symbol. Or you can think of it as grace, or something the ego couldn't have thought of for itself. And so that really, just to associate that, that maps on to the caterpillar butterfly metaphor, that how we're actually in that stage. We're in a transitional stage. We're in this in between, like this bardo, Tibetan word bardo, the gap between one world and another, or one state of consciousness and another. And how things are going to turn out, it's not deterministic. Like quantum physics says, it's a probabilistic universe. And it really depends on us, on if we have the recognition something is being revealed to us. And it's not light coming from heaven like it did 2,000 years ago. It's coming through the darkness. It's coming from the underworld through matter. And if we have the recognition of what's being revealed, that it's something inside of us that we're unconscious of, then we can actually, it unlocks our creative spirit. But if we don't have the recognition, then we're just going to be compelled to recreate our trauma like we're seeing all over the world, on the world stage.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy hearing you speak about this and
Mhm.
putting it in words, because it's so easy to get involved with what's coming through the major media and what other people are occupied with, which is the conflict, the conflict, the conflict. So how do you suppose it's best for people to move into the most positive potential here? I mean, it's
Yeah,
one
yeah,
thing
yeah.
to listen to you, but it's
Right.
another thing to really move into what you're talking about and manifest it. How can people
Yeah.
do this? What's your
Yeah, yeah,
thought?
yeah. Well, okay, like for me, I can just talk out of my own personal experience to the extent that I've been able to hold the conflict that I was struggling with that, precipitated my whole spiritual awakening. It came out of intense conflict and suffering. And, the story isn't important, but the idea is that I was able to hold it over, it's been, since the early 80s, so a long time, to the point where it's gotten me more familiar and acquainted with my true nature. And
Mm,
but that's a cliche. We hear about our true nature. What does that even mean? Well, I point out that our true nature, by its nature, is creative.
mm,
So when we have realization of our true nature, we embody and express ourselves creatively. And when, we express and embody ourselves creatively, it deepens the realization of our nature in a positive feedback loop that actually creates light. So, on the one hand, I would say, yeah, to the extent that any of us could really get in touch with who we actually are, not our persona, not our conditioned self, not our false self, but our actual true nature, and to get in touch and to express ourselves creatively. Because the greatest poison in the human psyche is repressed and unexpressed creativity.
mm,
So we are being asked to really get in touch with our creative voice, whatever the medium is. And one other way of saying it, because I can answer this question in a million different ways, it's all pointing at the same thing, is having the recognition that we're having a collectively shared dream, that this universe, that's what I realized in 1981 when I had my spiritual awakening that made me so ecstatic. I was realizing, oh my God, we're all characters in each other's dreams. We're dreaming up this universe into materialization each and every moment. And I was so excited and enthusiastic that within hours I got thrown in a mental hospital and diagnosed as, oh, you have this mental illness and you'll have it for the rest of your life. And so I was able to navigate through that. It was not easy, and but the idea is now I've stabilized and integrated the realization sufficiently, and I'm still a work in progress, like all of us. But one way I can articulate it is to the extent that we can have the realization of the dreamlike nature.
Mm.
And when, having that realization, and this is exactly what quantum is why I have a new book coming out on quantum physics. This is what quantum physics is actually, this is the main central point of the revelation that is quantum physics. It's empirically proven that we're having a collectively shared dream. And when you realize that, it unlocks the most unimaginably vast creative spirit that is our nature.
Well, I love hearing what you say, and I've reached into these altitudes, and I do consider them altitudes of consciousness through meditation, and as well as creativity. I've also
Right.
been an author, but do you think that meditation has an important role to play here? Because
Oh, completely, completely. So I've been a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner for over 40 years. And in Tibetan Buddhism, the real foundation of any of the higher practices of visualization or whatever is to develop mindfulness,
mm,
really cultivate that mindfulness. And if you don't have that, then any of the more advanced practices you can't do. And I've been fortunate in that, when I got out of the last hospital in 82, and everybody in my universe was telling me, oh, you're mentally ill and just in denial of your illness. And I knew that something really profound was happening for me. And I knew I had to find people who were fluent, who could understand what I was experiencing. And I was fortunate to find some of the greatest of the Tibetan lamas. And so I would go to them all the time. And I just kept on asking them, can I meet with you again? And they would never turn me down. So I would meet with them, at least once a week, maybe multiple times a week for years. And they're like family, I'm really fortunate. I've known them over 40 years. And they weren't just like telling me about the teachings, they were embodying the Buddha Dharma. They were embodying, because the whole teachings of meditation are about connecting with your nature. And what
yes.
is your nature? It's love, it's compassion. And they were just embodying the very thing they were talking about. And I was just talking to a friend today, and he's met my teachers too for years, and we were both commenting on how unbelievably profound it is to get into intimate relationship with somebody who's a really genuine spiritual teacher,
Yeah.
because they're transmitting all the time and they're completely relaxed, totally at ease. And, when we're all empathic, we all are tuning into each other and all that. But when you hang out with somebody who's so congruent, you know, and so just embodying their nature and just oozing love and compassion, it's contagious. It affects you, and that can only be helpful.
Yeah. Well, you were mentioning a few minutes ago about discovering your true self and being able to be with someone like the people that you're talking about, these
Mhm.
highly realized people. They are being in their true self without any other stuff going on, addiction,
Right.
for instance, and
Right.
it
Yeah,
can
yeah. And
be
they helped me.
absolutely transformative.
They
Yes.
helped me because I had just come out of the psychiatric community where everybody was pathologizing me and concretizing me as being mentally ill. And I knew I wasn't. And I noticed when I was hanging out with them, they weren't solidifying me as in a pathological way. They were relating to me like I was a whole, awake, and healed person. And I was deeply impacted. It was like they were giving me a bridge for me to step into that whole healed and awake part of myself.
Yes.
And then I began to realize, oh wow, they were doing that because they're in touch with that part of themselves.
Yeah.
And then fast forward over decades, and I've been in private practice now for 30 years, and I've realized, oh, that's what I do. It's like natural to just when you meet somebody, yeah, they could be identified with their neuroses or their wound or trauma or abuse issues. And to me, I call that's their Halloween costume. That's not who we are. That's not who they are. But if you're in touch with your own nature, you see them as already healed and whole and awake. And that, how can that not help them? And it helps you.
Thank you. So, sounds like that's our next step in terms of welcoming in the butterfly that we have within within us that's maybe now entrenched in some goo and in a process of transformation, but a little bit of creativity or a lot of creativity and meditation may be extremely helpful for not only ourselves personally, but also for the collective.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that butterfly, it's, when you step when you step out of time, that butterfly already is actualized. Think of it as a symbol of our nature, right? And think about if, oh, I'm in Portland, Oregon, and, it rains here. There's a lot of clouds on a lot of days, so you can't see the sun, right? And the sun is symbolic of our nature. Well, the sun, even on the cloudiest day, it's radiantly shining. And
Yeah.
the clouds, they can symbolize the obscuring energies within our psyche.
Mm.
And so, in a sense, all we have to do is really purify ourselves of those clouds so that our radiant, sun-like nature, which is the butterfly, can just shine through. So that, in essence, I feel is the essence of spiritual practice, is to, in a sense, get out of our own way and stop contracting against our light such that we can let our light shine. And that becomes contagious. That can go viral. And that gives me incredible hope for the potentiality of there being a global awakening that's happening.
Thank you. Well, Paul, I'd love to invite you to come back. I hope that people who are listening to this short video will write in the comment box what they'd like to hear you speak about. And it's been such a pleasure to meet you and spend a little time with you today. So I'm going to stop the
Emma, same here, really. Thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.